Overall impressions from London and Dallas reclaiming their throne, at least for this home series.
I mean, I don't think it should be. I think we both predicted Dallas to do pretty well, even though I believe I picked the subliners to take it again, which was completely wrong. And I don't think Dallas winning this is a shock, right? Like, it's not a huge upset. It's not even necessarily, and like, I say this in no offense to Paris, because I think Paris looked so much better this weekend. I know we're going to talk about them next. But whenever you have like a massive upset like you do with Paris, I think, in making it through the bracket, and then that 5-game series that they had against London, which isn't as massive of an upset as people would think, but it was still an upset. Whenever that happens, you do tend to have more one-sided final series like we saw in this. I mean, Dallas, they beat Paris on Ramaza the first time they met, like 250-73,
yeah,
right?
It was bad.
So it was, Paris improved and they had looked a lot better across the board at this tournament. But for me, in terms of who was going to win, I was looking at Dallas, I was looking at New York, and I was looking at Florida. And I was like, okay, it's, one of these three teams. And I think Dallas is so weird because I feel like they immediately like go out of people's heads when they don't play, which is very funny. Like, of all of the top teams, I feel like people always have like Atlanta and Huntsman in their minds. And then for whatever reason, when Dallas don't play, like, people just forget about them. And then they come back and they're like, we're still here, guys, and we're still really good. So, I mean, they looked really good this weekend, and I was happy to see them play and see them do well.
So Dallas had a 51.1% win rate on LAN, a 66.7% win rate online, best in the league, which is a marked improvement. Obviously, an increase of 15%. Paris, meanwhile, went from 56.8% on LAN, which was third in the league at the point, to 35.9% online, second last win rate online. And yet, here they are making the finals for the first time in a home series. I still, and good for them, because finally, like, if there is one team, Emily, that we have talked about the least,
yeah,
right? We never, ever talk about the Paris Legion. And to be fair, they don't give us much reason to talk about them. And now finally they've said, no. Le temps est maintenant. The time is now. Speak about us.
I also speak French.
That's right. We are well equipped to speak about the Paris Legion right now. So with that in mind, what did you make of Paris and their performance in this home series? And do you think that this is a sign of things to come for them?
So I'll say, like, one note I do want to make about the win rate thing is that one thing that's really frustrating, and not to say that these numbers should be completely thrown out, because I don't think they should, but one thing that's really frustrating is like you have that one launch weekend where it was league play.
Right.
And that is actually one of the reasons why Dallas is not in first right now. It's also one of the reasons why the subliners percentage, I think, is the highest from LAN to online. And then similarly with Paris, they did really well launch weekend, and they placed in London in the first actual physical home series. And then they've had a really rough time online, but those 20 points from that first week are counting significantly in the dip that they took, right, in win percentage. That's one thing I wanted to bring up. The thing about Paris that we've repeated, whenever we've talked about Paris, we've kind of just been like, oh yeah, they're inconsistent, right? Like that's what we've said about them the entire time. Like, it's not like we haven't seen some really good performances from Zed. It's not like we haven't seen really good performances from Luka or Kismet. Like, we've seen them individually like pop off, right? And it's always been okay, but this team is so wildly inconsistent that they can't string together enough wins, or they can't turn these individual performances, regardless of how good they are, into actual map wins. One thing I think that was really interesting about Paris is their S&D, specifically in the London series. And like, obviously this did not hold true for Dallas, but I still consider Dallas to be one of the best S&D teams. So they had kind of a crushing loss in the finals to them. But I think their adjustments against London were really smart, because London typically tends to be a team that likes to be able to sit back, take their time, set up Weskin. He basically sits as a sniper. And you know, if they can take their time in setups, they're a lot better off. And they don't respond well to people's adjustments in game plans, and they don't respond well to like really, really unmitigated aggression. And I don't think unmitigated aggression is necessarily what we saw from Paris, but I did like a lot of their changes. That's obviously a crushing loss for London, right? Like, it comes down to like the very last possible point and they lose. Which is kind of, I feel like, a summation of the entire London season this year. Like, if a microcosm for that is that map. But I did like what Paris did. I think the problem with Paris is not that they don't have talent, but like, what are we going to see from them the next time, right? And I believe that they are they're done, so we won't see them again until champs. But yeah, I think that's always been the big thing about Paris. Is so like
they're currently in 8th, and they could go as far back as 10th based on this weekend's results.
Yeah, so I mean, that's still kind of a rough spot to be in. I think they did the best they could to put themselves in like a good position, right? Like, we were talking about teams that could do that at this event, and we talked about Optic, and we talked about possibly Seattle, and we talked about London, right? But we didn't really talk about Paris, and they put themselves in about the best position they could without winning the entire event, right? So that's a good sign for them. The problem is, like, whenever I see Paris do well, I don't know whether they're going to be able to do well the next week, right? Because there's been no guarantee for this team in terms of stringing together wins, be it like just maps within a series or like general series wins.
So going back to your point about Paris's SND in this tournament, they only lost one SND, and that was in the final against Dallas. They actually won the SND against Dallas on Friday, with the tournament beginning against the Dallas Empire. They went 6-5 both times against London in the semifinal, which was very, very dramatic. I love it, which was great. It was a lot of fun to watch as a neutral observer. Not so fun for our respective superiors, who are both London Royal Ravens fans. Shout out to them. But a lot of fun. So I don't know. Listen, if there was any time to have your best result of the season, it would be in your last showing going into playoffs. So maybe momentum will be a factor there. But I just feel like, given everything we've seen this season, this might be the highest that we see Paris all season long. And yeah, sure, a lot of that is where were the results the rest of the time. Not to say they can't replicate it, but they're still in a tough position, especially if Optic Gaming and Toronto have good weekends this weekend. That's going to be very rough for them, bringing them down to that last bottom 4 position, which would put you in the losers round 1, which is very difficult to get out of.